by George Bush Sr., and he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, or the Nobel Prize in Economics. In 1970, Milton Friedman published a manifesto in the New York Times Magazine called "The Social Responsibility of Business is to Increase Its Profits." This was no ordinary scholarly read on economics. Milton Friedman came down from the ivory tower and came out of the halls of academia swinging. This was a heavy-handed, double-dog, dare-you economic smackdown. He wanted you to know that if you thought business should produce any sociable and desirable ends, that you were a socialist. He wanted you to know that your thinking would undermine society. And if you were a do-gooder, well, you were a puppet. And nobody took you seriously. If you haven't read it, you should. This manifesto was of particular import because Milton Friedman defined that business had one and only one responsibility, that being shareholder wealth maximization. And in case that wasn't clear enough for you, he wanted you to understand that that meant that business had no other responsibilities whatsoever. Business should not, would not, and was not going to concern itself with any other distractions, such as pollution, such as wage disparity, such as discrimination. And so, Milton Friedman, in one decree, as represented by one title and one paragraph, simplified decision-making for business. And what I want to do here now is just take a look at a couple examples of the unintended consequences of profit-driven business. You may have thought he was retired. Marlboro Man is alive and well, back in the saddle again. Philip Morris is rocking a global strategy to compensate for diminishing sales in informed markets. Philip Morris is actually very enthused in Indonesia, which happens to be the world's largest unregulated tobacco market. By unregulated, that of course means it has no pesky limitations. Philip Morris is able to market and sell to minors in Indonesia, and it's there to make sure that it does. The CEO, Philip Morris CEO in Indonesia, John Gledwell, was asked about the unconscionable decision to enact such a strategy. And he wanted us to know that his conscience is just fine. And he's actually proud to be part of an organization that not only follows the law to the letter, but also to the spirit. This is an example of a decision, of a strategy, with an emphasis on profit, with no sense of responsibility for the social ends. Most of you don't know much about the life cycle of your telephone. All of our phones begin in a brutal conflict in the eastern Congo, where finite minerals are mined more often than not by child or slave labor. And then our phones end up either in a landfill or in an unregulated e-waste site across the country, across the world, where they leach hazardous waste. That's not the worst of it. Your phones are designed to last for 5 years. phone manufacturers and service providers have conditioned you to replace your phone between 12 and 18 months. This is a strategy that reflects an emphasis on profits without a sense of responsibility to the social ends. And finally, Congress convened a panel of nutrition scientists in response to the childhood obesity epidemic. And what they had asked was, could you please create guidelines for every food that we might combat this problem? The nutritionists decided that cereal, what they call ready-to-eat cereal, shouldn't contain any more 26% sugar added. Only 1 in 4 children's cereals years later adhere to the guidelines. This is a strategy that has an emphasis on profits without a sense of responsibility to the ideal outcomes, social outcomes. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. The results that we just looked at are not a natural expression or extension of a free market economy. What went wrong was that somehow so much emphasis on business and profits hijacked our own sense of judgment and confused us about what it was we were supposed to do at work and with our buying power. Because though no one was talking about it, in fact, Milton Friedman had said, you and I, we still have responsibilities. Our responsibilities were critical to the checks and balance system given the past that had just been given to business. This is how it was supposed to work. We were told in a paragraph buried very deep inside the Manifesto that in a free market economy, everybody is equal. You, the consumers, the employees, and business. And that we worked in balance and in harmony. And in an ideal free market, we were all able to participate on a voluntary basis. That meaning that if the terms were to our liking, we could engage. If they didn't, we couldn't. That, of course, meaning that there was a checks and balance system built into this economy with our values in mind. And in the final line of this paragraph, Friedman reminds us once again that business doesn't have responsibilities, but that we do. But he goes a step further here. He lets us know that our responsibilities are literally the factor that influences the rules of the game inside of a free market economy. In other words, capitalism only works if you do. Capitalism only works if you're willing to protect, to defend your human dignity, to protect your quality of life, and to stand for your own values. In all the talking about business's responsibility, how is it that nobody ever had this conversation with us? How is it that nobody defined what our roles and responsibilities were in a free market economy? Capitalism only works if you do. The only way that we get to be heard and have a voice in the decisions that will determine our national fate is to make ourselves relevant to this process. That means that we need to insert ourselves. It means we need to start seeing our very independent and private choices differently, more as social choices, civic choices, economic choices, political choices. The market will get what the market demands. What values, what is it that you want to see infused in the market? You might say, what does any of that mean? We can shift the economy, we can shift the way that things work now if we only determine what our values are and sync them with our demands. For example, Friedman said that we didn't have to have any kind of controls or regulations, such as minimum wage. He said that in a free market economy, the people would take care of that. Well, we really dropped the ball on that one. But it's not too late to do something about it. If, in fact, we think that infusing our values into the economy could be done and would benefit society by supporting brands that already support the human experience, we need to make every effort to support businesses that have figured out that it's not only feasible, but that it is beneficial to pay a living wage. By doing so, the exponential advantage is that we shift more business, more opportunity, and create more jobs inside of that organization that's already being a responsible steward. That's just one example. Perhaps you care about the ecology. How do you support businesses with green initiatives? Perhaps you care that organizations pay their fair share of taxes and support the infrastructure. How will you support those businesses and depriving businesses that don't pay their fair share? Let's go back to the cell phone. What if we encouraged our cell phone manufacturers and electronics manufacturers to consider that we wanted not more features, but that what we wanted was the process to begin differently and the process to end differently? That we wanted them to manage the life cycle responsibly. We don't want more, we want better. In the law of, well, I don't remember the law right now, but help me. The laws of demand and, thank you. All right. Businesses will make what we want to buy, and they will implement practices that we want to support. And in using our market demand for values versus more stuff, we now have created companies in which we actually want to work. I say all of this to get to this point. You are the answer to a human-centric, sustainable ecology that has the potential to fuel the human spirit and restore dignity to the human experience rather than demand more junk cheap. We don't have to wait for regulations to be enacted. If you want food in your grocery store to be labeled, all you have to do is make your voice heard. Sooner or later, someone will do it if enough of us are asking for our food to be labeled. We don't have to wait for regulation. As Renaissance citizens, all that we have to do is decide what's in our power, what's in our control, and then act. And I would say this to you. It concerns me that I may have to say to my children or my grandchildren that my generation may in fact not be remembered for what we created. My generation may, in fact, be remembered for what we tolerated. And so I ask you to consider, what is it that you value most? What is it that really matters? And how can you impress those values and those responsibilities back on the market to create a demand that gets a response that invokes change? Thank you.